The massive crystal dome of the Galactic Council chamber glittered under the light of 3 artificial suns. Inside, representatives from 17 spacefaring civilizations shifted nervously in their specially designed seats. Emergency alarms had called them from their quarters in the middle of the rest cycle. No one looked happy to be there. Admiral Lisa Morgan sat quietly in the human section. Her gray hair was pulled back in a neat bun, and her blue uniform displayed rows of service medals. At 62 years old, she represented Earth and its colonies with the same steady calm that had earned her command of humanity's deepest space fleet. Around her, aliens of all shapes and sizes spoke in worried tones. Some had tentacles instead of arms. Others floated in special tanks. A few glowed with strange inner light. Despite their differences, they all shared the same fear. High Chancellor Zithval raised all 10 of his limbs for silence. The Corellian's purple skin shimmered as he moved to the center of the speaking platform. "Honored representatives," he began, his translator converting his clicks and whistles into standard galactic common. "I bring grave news. The Vraxian invasion fleet has broken through our outer defenses." Gasps and the alien equivalent of muttered curses filled the chamber. Lisa remained still, her face betraying nothing. "2 colony worlds have fallen," Zithval continued. "New Centauri and Proxima Beta are under enemy control. Their civilian populations are being processed for slave labor." The Tellurian representative, a slender being with silver skin who barely looked 30 years old, jumped to his feet. "How could this happen? We were promised that the defense grid would hold." "The Vraxians used a new weapon technology," Zithval explained, projecting images of massive ships firing strange green energy beams. "Our shields could not withstand it. Based on current calculations, they will reach the Centauri Prime system within 2 standard weeks." The room erupted into chaos. Some representatives demanded immediate evacuation of threatened systems. Others called for pulling back to stronger defensive positions. A few suggested surrender negotiations. "Our combined fleets are stretched too thin," Zithval said once he had restored order. "We need a new strategy or more systems will fall." Lisa Morgan stood up slowly. The movement, unhurried and deliberate, somehow commanded attention despite its gentleness. The room fell quiet. "Earth will deploy the Veterans Corps," she stated simply. Confused murmurs spread across the chamber. The concept clearly meant nothing to most representatives. The Tellurian representative laughed, a musical sound without humor. "You mean your aged humans? Soldiers above 50 Earth years?" He looked around the room, seeking support for his mockery. What possible advantage could such old specimens provide? Lisa didn't react to the insult. She had expected it. Most Galactic Council species retired their military personnel after 10 or 15 years of service. They considered older soldiers obsolete, their reflexes too slow, their bodies too weak. The idea of keeping soldiers with decades of experience seemed foolish to them. "Chancellor Zithval," Lisa said, addressing the leader directly. "The Vraxians have never faced human veterans before. They don't know what they're up against." The Arcturian representative, a being of pure energy contained in a hovering metal sphere, pulsed with doubt. "Admiral Morgan, we respect Earth's willingness to help, but the data is clear. Physical decline begins for humans around age 30. By 50, reaction time has decreased by nearly 20%. Lisa nodded. "That's correct. And yet I would put a squad of our 60-year-old veterans against your best young warriors any day." "This is absurd," the Tellurian said. "We need real solutions, not desperate human pride." Lisa pulled out a small device and placed it on the central table. It projected a hologram showing training exercises. Gray-haired humans in combat gear moved with smooth precision through obstacle courses. They fired weapons with remarkable accuracy. They worked together with minimal verbal communication. "What you're seeing is the Veterans Corps during routine training," Lisa explained. "Every person you see here has at least 30 years of combat experience. They've fought in the Mars Rebellion, the Europa Campaign, the Kuiper Belt Pirate Wars, and dozens of smaller conflicts." The council members watched in silence as the hologram showed the veterans completing complex tactical scenarios with what appeared to be effortless coordination. Impressive for their age, admitted the Paxarian representative, a small blue-furred being whose species rarely lived beyond 40 years. But surely they cannot match the speed and strength of the Vraxian shock troops. They don't need to, Lisa replied. Speed and strength are not everything in battle. Experience, judgment, and teamwork often matter more. High Chancellor Zithval studied the hologram carefully. How many of these veterans can Earth deploy? 5,000 immediately. Another 15,000 within one standard week. A shocked silence followed. Most council species had never considered keeping so many older soldiers active. The Veterans Corps has been training for this kind of emergency for decades, Lisa continued. They specialize in hostile planetary environments, urban combat, and counter-invasion tactics. Many have fought species similar to the Vraxians during the Orion conflict 20 years ago. The Danubian representative, a tall insect-like being, clicked his mandibles thoughtfully. I remember the Orion conflict. The humans turned that situation around when everyone thought it was hopeless. Because we used veterans then too, Lisa said. Soldiers who had seen everything, who couldn't be surprised or panicked. Chancellor, Zithval raised a limb, signaling his decision. Very well, Admiral Morgan. Earth may deploy its Veterans Corps to the Centauri system. But I must warn you, if they fail, that system and possibly your own solar system will be lost. Lisa nodded solemnly. They won't fail, Chancellor. And after this, the Galactic Council might want to reconsider how it treats its experienced warriors. As the meeting adjourned, the Tellurian representative approached Lisa. Your confidence is admirable, human, but I fear you're sending your elders to their deaths. Lisa smiled, the expression transforming her stern face into something almost kind. Age is not the weakness you think it is. Our veterans have something your young soldiers will never have. They've seen it all before. Nothing surprises them anymore. She turned and walked away, already sending the deployment codes to Earth through her secure communicator. Within hours, transport ships would be loading with men and women whose gray hair and lined faces hid their greatest weapon. Decades of battle wisdom no training simulation could provide. Far away, in a training facility on Earth, Colonel Isabella Ramirez received the alert. At 71, she had more combat experience than most entire alien military units combined. She smiled as she read the deployment orders, then looked up at the room full of veterans who waited for her announcement. Ladies and gentlemen, she said to the gray-haired soldiers, it's time to show the galaxy what old warriors can do. The USS Valiant dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Centauri system. The massive battleship's hull bore the scars of previous conflicts, patches of newer metal standing out against the older sections. Inside the bridge, Captain Frank Delaney stood with his hands clasped behind his back. At 67 years old, his body remained strong despite the gray hair and network of wrinkles that marked his face. Status report, he commanded, his deep voice carrying the weight of decades of authority. Lieutenant Amy Dixon looked up from her console. Though she was the youngest officer on the bridge at 45, she had still served in 2 major conflicts. Vraxian, fleet detected at the edge of the asteroid belt, sir, she reported. 17 warships and what looks like 3 troop carriers. They formed a blockade around the planet. Frank nodded, studying the tactical display. Red triangles marked the enemy positions while blue dots showed the few remaining defense satellites. Most had already been destroyed. Any response from the colony? He asked. Communications Officer Joe Hayes shook his head. Nothing, sir. The main settlement has been dark for 3 days. Orbital scans show damage to the government buildings and spaceport. Frank's face remained calm, but his eyes hardened. He had seen too many colonies fall during his career. Each one felt like a personal failure, even when there was nothing he could have done. Deploy reconnaissance drones, he ordered. I want eyes on the ground before we send in our people, and get me Colonel Ramirez on comms. The main view screen flickered to life, showing the face of Colonel Isabella Ramirez. Her dark hair had gone completely white, and her brown skin showed the lines of her 71 years. She wore battle armor with the Veterans Corps insignia, a rising phoenix with the words, "Experience overcomes all," beneath it. Captain, she greeted him with a nod. We're ready down here. Behind her, Frank could see rows of drop pods and hundreds of soldiers preparing their equipment. All were gray-haired. All moved with the quiet confidence of warriors who had survived where others had fallen. The drones are launching now, Frank told her. We should have ground intel in 30 minutes. How are your troops holding up? Isabella smiled. Eager. Some of them have been waiting decades for another shot at the Vraxians. After what happened at Proxima 4 20 years ago, this feels like unfinished business. Frank remembered that battle. It had been a narrow victory, with heavy losses on both sides. Many of the veterans preparing for this drop had fought there as younger soldiers. The Council doesn't believe you can make a difference, Isabella, he said quietly. She laughed. When have aliens ever understood humans? They think our short lives make us weak. They don't realize our short lives make us value every moment and prepare for every possibility. The ship's alert system suddenly blared. Lieutenant Dixon's fingers flew over her console. Sir, Vraxian fighters approaching. They must have detected our exit from hyperspace. Frank turned back to the screen. Time to prove the Council wrong, Colonel. Launch as soon as you have landing coordinates. We'll keep their fleet busy. Good hunting, Captain, Isabella replied before the screen went dark. Frank settled into his command chair as the ship's weapon systems came online. Battle stations. All hands prepare for combat. Deploy fighter screen, defensive pattern Delta. The vast ship hummed with energy as crew members raced to their positions. These weren't young recruits, but seasoned veterans who had drilled for this scenario hundreds of times. Below decks, Colonel Ramirez strapped herself into her drop pod. Around her, 300 veterans did the same. Their faces showed no fear, only determination and focus. Listen up, she said through the comm system. Drone data is coming in now. The Vraxians have established their command center in the colony's government building. They have approximately 2,000 troops on the ground, mostly concentrated in the central district. She touched her display, sending tactical maps to everyone's helmets. We'll drop in 4 groups. Alpha team with me will take the north approach. Beta under Major Wells will come in from the east. Gamma and Delta will secure the landing zone and protect the civilians we find. Remember your training. Remember your experience. In her pod, Sergeant Olivia Grant checked her rifle one final time. At 60 years old, she had been a sniper for almost 4 decades. Her hands, though lined with age, moved with perfect precision. Just like old times, said the voice of her spotter, Corporal Sam Rivera, from the pod next to hers. Better, Olivia replied. This time I can see without those cheap military glasses they used to give us. Laughter rippled through the comm system. Many of the veterans joked before battle, not from nervousness like younger soldiers, but from the comfortable familiarity of routine. On the bridge, Captain Delaney watched as the first wave of Vraxian fighters approached. The aliens clearly expected to face a standard human warship with a crew of young soldiers. They had no idea that every person aboard the Valiant had fought their kind before. Hold fire until optimal range, Frank ordered. Let them think we're hesitating. The enemy fighters grew larger on the view screen, their sleek purple hulls gleaming in the light of the Centauri star. Now, Frank said calmly, the Valiant's weapons came to life, firing with a precision that caught the Vraxian squadron by surprise. 3 fighters exploded immediately. 2 more spun out of control, their engines damaged. Drop pods away, announced Lieutenant Dixon. On the tactical display, Frank watched as 100 small blue dots detached from the Valiant and streaked toward the planet below. The Vraxians, focused on the larger threat of the battleship, didn't notice the pods until they were already entering the atmosphere. Inside her pod, Colonel Ramirez felt the familiar sensation of atmospheric entry. The metal shell around her heated up as friction with the air created a fiery trail. She had done this maneuver more times than she could count, on more worlds than most humans had ever visited. 1 minute to touchdown, she announced to her troops. Remember, the Vraxians will expect us to be slow and weak because of our age. Use that misconception against them. The pods crashed through the cloud layer, their descent only slightly slowed by small thrusters. They aimed for the forest, 3 kilometers from the main settlement, far enough to avoid immediate detection, close enough to reach their targets quickly. Colonel Ramirez braced herself for impact as her pod slammed into the soft earth of New Centauri. The shock absorbers took most of the force, but she still felt the jolt through her reinforced battle armor. The front hatch blew open automatically and she emerged into the alien forest, her weapon ready. Around her, other pods were landing and veterans were deploying with practiced efficiency. No wasted motion, no unnecessary words. Just smooth, coordinated action, the hallmark of soldiers who had done this 1,000 times before. Major Henry Wells approached her position, moving quietly despite his armored suit. At 65, his face showed the scars of battles on 7 different worlds. "All units reporting successful drops, Colonel," he said. "No casualties. Beta team is in position." Isabella nodded, checking her tactical display. "Good. We move in 15 minutes. Let the Vraxians continue to think the Valiant is their only problem." She looked up at the sky, where flashes of light showed the battle continuing in orbit. Then, she turned to the horizon, where the lights of the human settlement glowed, now occupied by an enemy who had never faced Earth's oldest and most dangerous warriors. "They have no idea what's coming," she said quietly. The forest outside the New Centauri settlement was quiet in the pre-dawn light. Animals that normally called and chirped had gone silent, sensing the tension in the air. Colonel Isabella Ramirez checked her tactical display one last time. 300 veterans were in position, surrounding the colony from all sides. They had moved through the forest during the night with barely a sound, despite their age and the weight of their battle armor. "All teams report ready," Major Wells whispered through the comm. Isabella nodded, then gave the order everyone was waiting for. "Operation Silver Fox begins now. All units advance." Like shadows, the human veterans moved toward the settlement. They used trees and rocks for cover, staying low to the ground. Their movements weren't as fast as younger soldiers might be, but they were smoother, more efficient, and completely silent. Through her helmet's enhanced vision, Isabella could see the Vraxian sentries posted around the settlement perimeter. The aliens stood over 7 feet tall, with 4 arms and scaly purple skin. They carried energy rifles and wore light armor that left their joints exposed, a weakness the veterans had noted in previous conflicts. Sergeant Olivia Grant settled into position on a small hill overlooking the colony's main entrance. She assembled her sniper rifle with practiced ease, her 60-year-old hands moving through motions they had performed countless times before. Beside her, Corporal Sam Rivera set up the targeting computer. "I have eyes on 12 sentries at the main gate," Olivia reported. 4 more patrolling the east wall. "Confirmed," replied Isabella. "All snipers. Target the sentries on my mark. 3, 2, 1, mark." 12 silent shots fired simultaneously. 12 Vraxian sentries fell, their bodies hitting the ground before any alarm could be raised. The 4 patrolling aliens were next, taken out with the same quiet efficiency. "First wave, go," ordered Isabella. 50 veterans moved forward, crossing the open ground between the forest and the settlement in a practiced formation. They reached the walls without detection and quickly scaled them, using magnetic grips on their gloves and boots. Inside the settlement, most of the Vraxian forces were still sleeping in their temporary barracks. They had conquered this colony with ease 3 days ago and expected no resistance. The few aliens on night duty were focused outward, watching for threats from space rather than from the surrounding forest. The first Vraxian patrol to discover something was wrong, turned a corner and found Major Wells waiting. The alien raised its weapon, but Henry was faster despite his 65 years. His energy blade sliced through the Vraxian's rifle before it could fire, and his second strike brought the alien down without a sound. "Western quadrant secure," Henry reported, moving to the central plaza. Similar reports came in from around the settlement as the veterans systematically eliminated Vraxian patrols. They didn't rely on speed or strength, but on perfect positioning, teamwork built over decades, and the element of surprise. Colonel Ramirez led her team toward the colony's government building, where intelligence suggested the Vraxian commander had established his headquarters. The four-story structure dominated the central plaza, its white walls now marked with Vraxian symbols. "Team Alpha, with me," she said. "Beta Team, secure the civilian housing blocks. Delta and Gamma, prepare for the second phase." As they approached the building, a Vraxian alarm finally sounded. The aliens had discovered their sentries were missing. Lights came on throughout the settlement as the invaders scrambled to respond to the unexpected threat. "Right on schedule," Isabella noted, checking her chronometer. The veterans had planned for this moment, knowing they couldn't maintain complete surprise forever. The first group of Vraxian soldiers rushed into the plaza, weapons ready. They were young by their species standards, strong and fast but inexperienced. They moved in tight formation, following textbook tactics that any seasoned soldier could predict. "Now," said Isabella. Veterans positioned in buildings around the plaza opened fire from multiple angles. The Vraxians, caught in the crossfire, tried to scatter but found every escape route blocked. Within minutes, the entire squad was down. "They're sending reinforcements from the barracks," reported Corporal Rivera from his observation post. "At least 100 troops," Isabella smiled. "Just as we expected. Sergeant Jensen, are you in position?" An older man's voice replied, "Yes, Colonel. Explosives are planted and ready." "Wait until they're all inside the kill zone," she instructed, on her tactical display. Isabella watched red dots representing Vraxian forces pour out of their barracks and rush toward the plaza. The aliens moved rapidly, confident in their superior numbers. They didn't notice the small devices attached to buildings along their route. "Now, Jensen," she ordered, when the last Vraxian had entered the narrow street. The explosion wasn't large, but it didn't need to be. The carefully placed charges collapsed the buildings on either side of the street, trapping the Vraxian reinforcements under tons of rubble. "All teams, advance to Phase 2, Isabella commanded. "Government building is our primary target." Her team approached the main entrance of the headquarters building. 2 Vraxian guards stood ready, alerted by the commotion in the plaza. Isabella didn't slow down. At 71, she moved with the confidence of someone who had faced greater dangers many times before. The guards fired, but Isabella and her team had already scattered, using the plaza's decorative planters for cover. Return fire from the veterans took down one guard. The other retreated inside, sealing the doors. "Wells, what's your status?" Isabella asked. "In position at the rear entrance," he replied. "We can breach on your order." "Do it." While the Vraxians focused on the front assault, Major Wells and his team blew open the service entrance at the back of the building. They moved inside quickly, encountering minimal resistance. Meanwhile, Isabella approached the sealed front doors. She nodded to an older woman carrying a heavy pack. "Lieutenant Carol Evans, you're up." Carol smiled as she removed a device from her pack and attached it to the doors. At 63, she had been the Veterans Corps' top demolitions expert for 15 years. "Stand back," she warned. "This new formula has a bit more kick than the old one." The doors didn't just open, they disintegrated, leaving a cloud of dust and debris. Isabella led her team through the opening, weapons ready. Inside, confused Vraxians tried to organize a defense, but they were too slow. The veterans moved through the building methodically, clearing each room with practiced efficiency. They didn't rush or waste energy. Each movement was calculated, each shot precise. On the top floor, they found the Vraxian commander, larger than his soldiers, with ceremonial scars covering his purple scales. He stood surrounded by his personal guard, all holding weapons aimed at the door. "Humans," he hissed through his translator when Isabella entered the room. "Old humans? This is what Earth sends against us?" Pathetic. Isabella didn't bother responding to the taunt. She simply raised her hand and gave a signal. From the windows behind the Vraxian commander, Major Wells and his team appeared, having scaled the outside of the building while the aliens focused on the door. The Vraxian commander realized too late that he had been outmaneuvered by soldiers he had dismissed as too old to fight. His guards fell quickly under coordinated fire from both directions. Left alone, the commander drew his ceremonial blade. "I will not surrender to elderly humans." Isabella removed her helmet, revealing her white hair and lined face. "We're not just elderly humans," she said calmly. "We're veterans who have fought your kind before. We've been planning for this day for 20 years. 4 hours after the first veteran had set foot in the settlement, Colonel Ramirez stood on the roof of the government building. She raised the Earth flag as the sun rose over New Centauri. Below, the remaining Vraxians were being rounded up and secured. She activated her comlink to the USS Valiant in orbit. "Captain Delaney, the ground war is over. New Centauri is back, under human control." Frank's voice came through clearly. "Casualties. 7 wounded. No fatalities," Isabella reported with pride. "And we've captured their commander along with valuable intelligence about their fleet movements." There was a pause before Frank replied. "The Galactic Council representatives are watching our battle feeds. They're speechless." Isabella laughed. "Tell them this was just the beginning. The old wolves of Earth are on the hunt now, and we never forget our prey." The massive viewing chamber of the Galactic Council space station hummed with tense voices. Representatives from 17 species gathered around the central holographic display, watching the battle unfold across the Centauri system. High Chancellor Zithval stood at the center, all 10 of his limbs perfectly still as he studied the tactical feeds. "This is unexpected," he admitted, his translator converting his clicks into standard galactic common. On the main screen, they watched as human veterans systematically liberated not just New Centauri, but 3 other colonies across the system. Each operation followed the same pattern: perfect stealth approaches, coordinated strikes, and tactical brilliance that left the Vraxians confused and defeated. Admiral Lisa Morgan stood quietly to one side, her face carefully neutral despite the pride she felt. The Veterans Corps was performing even better than she had promised. "How is this possible?" asked the Tellurian representative who had mocked the idea of aged human soldiers just days before. "They're so old." "Age brings wisdom," Lisa replied, simply. "Each gray hair represents a lesson learned." The Paxarian representative, whose species rarely lived beyond 40 years, leaned forward to examine the footage more closely. "They move differently than the younger soldiers I've observed in human forces. Less speed, perhaps," noted an Arcturian observer, "but also less wasted motion, more efficiency." Lisa nodded. "Every action is calculated based on decades of combat experience. They don't rush, they don't panic, they've seen it all before." On the main screen, they watched as Colonel Ramirez's team breached the Vraxian command center on New Centauri's moon base. The operation was perfect. No flashy heroics, no unnecessary risks, just methodical, relentless progress. "And observe their psychological advantage," Lisa continued. "The Vraxians expect weakness from age. Our veterans use that misconception." The Paxarian tilted his blue-furred head. "But surely their bodies are failing them? The physical toll is managed through medical technology, specialized training, and adaptive tactics," Lisa explained. "But more importantly, what they've lost in raw physical power, they've gained in something far more valuable: judgment." The council chamber fell silent as they watched a gray-haired human sergeant calmly reprogram a Vraxian security node while under fire. His hands remained steady. As he worked, his voice quiet as he directed his team's defense. "He's 73 standard years old," Lisa told them. "Sergeant Ben Cooper. He's been hacking alien systems since before most of your young soldiers were born." In another part of the display, they could see Major Wells leading an assault on a Vraxian-held space platform. His team moved with perfect coordination, each member instinctively covering the others. "They fight as one organism," observed Zithval. "How long have these soldiers trained together?" "Some of them have fought side by side for over 40 years, Lisa answered. "They can predict each other's moves without speaking. They know each other's strengths and weaknesses better than they know their own." On the USS Valiant, Captain Frank Delaney received the latest battle reports with quiet satisfaction. The space around New Centauri had been cleared of Vraxian ships. The enemy fleet was retreating, caught off guard by the skillful tactics of the veteran crews. "Sir," called Lieutenant Amy Dixon from her station, "we're receiving a transmission from the Council observation vessel." Frank straightened his uniform, put it through. The view screen flickered to life, showing the face of High Chancellor Zithval. Behind him, other council representatives could be seen, all watching Frank with newfound respect. Captain Delaney, the Chancellor began formally. The Council wishes to express its appreciation for humanity's intervention in the Centauri system. Frank nodded. Our veterans are happy to serve, Chancellor. We have been monitoring their performance with great interest, Zithval continued. It has caused us to reconsider certain assumptions about human capabilities. I'm glad to hear that, sir. The Tellurian representative pushed his way into the frame. How do you maintain their physical abilities at such advanced ages? Our medical science suggests it should be impossible. Frank smiled slightly. Regular training, proper medical care, and most importantly, purpose. These men and women never stopped being soldiers. They didn't allow their skills to fade with time. Fascinating, murmured the Tellurian. We have much to learn from humanity, it seems. After the transmission ended, Frank turned to his communications officer. Get me Colonel Ramirez on the surface. Isabella's face soon appeared on the screen, her battle armor dusty from the fight but her eyes bright with victory. Frank, she greeted him. I hear the council is impressed. They're practically falling over themselves, Frank confirmed with a small smile. How are things on the ground? We've secured all major installations. The civilian population is safe. Most were just locked in their homes, not processed for labor camps as we feared. The Vraxians hadn't been here long enough. Casualties? Isabella's face grew serious. 12 wounded across all operations in the system. 2 serious but stable. No fatalities. Frank nodded, hiding his relief. Every veteran was precious, not just for their skills but for the knowledge they carried. Each loss would be irreplaceable. The Vraxian commander we captured has been quite informative, Isabella continued. Their fleet wasn't expecting organized resistance. They thought this would be an easy conquest. They'll know better next time, Frank said. Back in the council chamber, the representatives had moved from shock to active discussion. The tactical displays still showed the veterans' operations, but now the aliens were analyzing the humans' movements, studying their techniques. We have underestimated humanity, High Chancellor Zithval finally admitted to Admiral Morgan. Your Veterans Corps has accomplished in days what our regular forces failed to do in weeks. Lisa nodded acknowledgement of the compliment. Chancellor, may I suggest that the Council consider establishing its own veteran forces? Many of your species live far longer than humans. Imagine the effectiveness of soldiers with centuries of experience. The chamber buzzed with conversation as representatives considered this revolutionary idea. For most council species, the concept of keeping elderly citizens in active military service had never been considered. But the physical limitations, began the Tellurian. Can be overcome, interrupted the Danebian representative. If humans can do it with their short lifespans, surely our longer-lived species could develop similar programs. High Chancellor Zithval raised his limbs for silence. Admiral Morgan, the Council requests a full briefing on how Earth selects, trains, and deploys its veteran forces. We wish to understand this advantage. Of course, Chancellor, Lisa agreed. I can arrange for some of our Veterans Corps officers to provide demonstrations and training techniques. That would be most appreciated, Zithval said. And perhaps it might be wise to discuss a more permanent alliance between Earth and the Council. Your perspective appears to be valuable in ways we had not anticipated. Lisa kept her expression neutral, though inside she felt triumph. This was exactly what Earth had been seeking for decades, recognition as equals in the galactic community, not just as the young, short-lived species that the older races tended to dismiss. In the forests, outside the new Centauri settlement, Sergeant Olivia Grant sat on a fallen log, cleaning her sniper rifle with practiced care. Nearby, other veterans were enjoying a brief rest after the battle, drinking coffee from their field kits and sharing quiet jokes. Not bad for a bunch of old-timers, Corporal Rivera said, as he dropped onto the log beside her. Olivia smiled. Not bad at all. Though my knees are going to complain tomorrow. Worth it, though, Sam replied, looking up at the settlement where the Earth flag now flew. The look on that Vraxian commander's face when he realized he'd been beaten by a bunch of gray hairs? Priceless. Think the Council's finally getting it? Olivia asked, reassembling her weapon with smooth motions. They're starting to. Took them long enough. Colonel Ramirez approached, still in her battle armor but with her helmet removed. Pack up, people. We've got new orders coming in. The veterans looked up with interest rather than weariness. The Council wants us to liberate Proxima Beta next, Isabella told them. Apparently they've decided we're their secret weapon against the Vraxian fleet. Olivia stood, slinging her rifle over her shoulder. About time they figured that out. We've only been trying to tell them for 20 years. Better late than never, Isabella said with a smile. Especially at our age. 2 months after the first deployment of the Veterans Corps, the Vraxian invasion had been completely repelled. The purple-skinned aliens had retreated to their home systems, signing a hasty peace treaty with the Galactic Council. The terms were heavily favorable to the Council, something no one had expected when the invasion began. The USS Valiant entered Earth orbit, its hull bearing fresh battle scars alongside the older ones. Inside his quarters, Captain Frank Delaney read the latest orders from Earth Command, with a mixture of surprise and pride. A knock at his door interrupted his thoughts. "Enter," he called. Lieutenant Amy Dixon stepped inside and saluted. "Sir, we've received confirmation. The Galactic Council delegation has arrived in Earth orbit. Their shuttle will dock with us in 30 minutes. Frank nodded. "Thank you, Lieutenant. Inform Colonel Ramirez and make sure the honor guard is prepared." "Yes, sir." Amy hesitated, then added, "The crew is buzzing about this visit. No one can remember the last time so many high-ranking council members came to Earth." "That's because it's never happened before," Frank replied with a small smile. "We've always been the ones going to them, asking for recognition. This time, they're coming to us." After Amy left, Frank stood before the mirror in his quarters, straightening his dress uniform. At 67, he knew he looked every year of his age. The lines on his face told the story of battles fought across dozens of star systems. The gray in his hair marked decades of command decisions, some easy, many impossible. He didn't try to hide any of it. Not anymore, not after what the Veterans Corps had accomplished. In the main hangar bay, Colonel Isabella Ramirez stood with 50 veterans in formal dress uniforms. Every one of them had fought in the campaign against the Vraxians. Every one of them bore the marks of age and experience. Gray hair, lined faces, some with visible scars or prosthetic limbs. Isabella felt a swell of pride as she looked at them. These were her people, not just fellow soldiers, but men and women who had defied the expectations of an entire galaxy. "Nervous?" asked Major Henry Wells as he took his place beside her. Isabella laughed softly. "After facing down a Vraxian battlecruiser? Hardly. Though I will say diplomatic missions were never my favorite." "Mine either," Henry agreed. "Give me a clear enemy any day." The hangar bay doors opened and Captain Delaney entered, joining them just as the Council shuttle docked. The veterans straightened to attention as the airlock cycled. High Chancellor Zithval was the first to emerge, his purple skin shimmering under the hangar lights. Behind him came representatives from 12 other council species, all in their formal attire. They moved with the careful steps of beings accustomed to different gravity. "Captain Delaney," Zithval greeted, extending 3 of his 10 limbs in the formal council gesture of respect. "Colonel Ramirez, on behalf of the Galactic Council, I thank you for receiving us." Frank returned the gesture. "The honor is ours, Chancellor. Welcome to Earth space." "A historic moment," Zithval noted. "The first time a full council delegation has visited your system," the Tellurian representative stepped forward. Frank recognized him as the one who had mocked the idea of aged human soldiers months ago. The silver-skinned alien looked far less arrogant now. "Captain Colonel," he said, with a slight bow, "I must personally apologize for my earlier misconceptions about human capabilities. Your Veterans Corps has changed many minds in the Council." Isabella nodded acknowledgement. Understanding often comes through demonstration, Representative. The formal greetings completed, the group moved to the ship's conference room. Through the large viewport, Earth was visible, a blue marble hanging in the darkness of space. A beautiful world, commented the Danubian representative. We understand now why your people fight so fiercely to protect it. Chancellor Zithval took his place at the head of the table, a position usually reserved for the ship's captain. Frank had ordered it that way deliberately, a sign of respect for the highest diplomatic office in the galaxy. We have come with a proposal, Zithval began. The recent conflict with the Vraxians has exposed weaknesses in our defensive strategies. Your Veterans Corps showed us a resource we had been ignoring, the value of experienced warriors. He activated a holographic display in the center of the table. It showed plans for a new training facility, a massive space station with Earth-standard gravity. We propose the establishment of the first Galactic Veterans Academy, Zithval continued. A place where experienced soldiers from all council species, including humans, can train together and share their knowledge. Frank exchanged a surprised look with Isabella. This was far more than either of them had expected. The council will provide the resources to build the station, Zithval went on. Earth will provide the training protocols and initial instructors. All species will benefit from what we learn together. A generous offer, Chancellor, Frank said carefully. But I sense there's more to this proposal. The Tellurian representative nodded. Perceptive, Captain. Yes, there is more. The Council has voted to offer Earth full membership status, not the associate status you currently hold, but equal standing with the founding species. A murmur ran through the human officers. Earth had been seeking full Council membership for over 50 years, always being told that humans were too young, too inexperienced, too short-lived to qualify. What changed your minds? Isabella asked directly. You did, Colonel, answered Zithval. You and your Veterans Corps. You showed us that a species' lifespan is less important than what they do with the time they have. Humans pack more experience into your brief lives than some of our longest-lived races accumulate in centuries. 3 days later, at the Veterans Training Facility, in what had once been Colorado, Colonel Ramirez led the alien delegation through the complex. The visitors watched with fascination as humans in their 50s, 60s, and 70s engaged in combat simulations, tactical planning sessions, and specialized training. Your society values age, noted the Tellurian representative, watching as a team of silver-haired veterans coordinated a complex tactical exercise. We value experience, Isabella corrected. Each gray hair represents a lesson learned, often the hard way. Why would we discard that knowledge just because the body that houses it has aged? In the facility's central hall, a ceremony was underway. Captain Delaney stood at attention as Admiral Morgan presented him with a new command, the first mixed-species veteran task force, with representatives from 5 council races who had been inspired by humanity's example. The Vraxians believed that our diverse biology and technology were our strength. Admiral Morgan addressed the gathered crowd. They were wrong. Our greatest asset has always been the wisdom we accumulate through living, through surviving, through persisting when logic suggests we should fall. As the ceremony concluded, the High Chancellor approached Colonel Ramirez privately. Your species continues to confound our expectations, the alien admitted. When we first encountered humans, we thought your short lifespans would be your greatest weakness. Isabella smiled, the wrinkles around her eyes deepening. Chancellor, we humans have learned that it's not about how long you live, but what you learn along the way, and some lessons can only be taught by time itself. On a balcony overlooking the training grounds, Sergeant Olivia Grant stood with Corporal Sam Rivera, watching young recruits listening intently to a lecture given by Major Wells. Look at that, Sam said with satisfaction. A month ago, those kids thought we were just old relics. Now they're hanging on Henry's every word. The next generation, Olivia agreed, learning from our mistakes so they can make all new ones. Think they'll need us again? Sam asked. Now that the Vraxians have backed off? Olivia's eyes narrowed as she gazed at the horizon. Someone will always need us, Sam. That's why we stay ready. In orbit above Earth, The Galactic Council's observation ship recorded a new protocol to be distributed throughout Allied space. The Human Veterans Directive, a framework for incorporating experienced personnel of all species into critical operations regardless of age. The document began with a simple statement: a revolution in galactic military thinking, sparked by the sight of gray-haired humans entering the battlefield and changing the course of history.